Ruth Dyson.
Speech from a Canterbury Member of Parliament. What do people value? What do people value in a democracy? What do people value in a democracy? I think that they value their vote. This might come as gobsmackingly big news to the member who's just resumed his seat, but people overseas long for the right to vote. We sort of take it for granted in New Zealand, but we don't have it in Canterbury. And that minister, interjecting and giggling, said we can't possibly give Canterburyans a full right to vote for their regional council. Why? He said it. Honourable Dr Nick Smith said it in the Christchurch Press and on News Talk ZB and on Radio New Zealand. He said it's too risky. Oh, too risky. Too risky to give us our right to vote in the same way as every other person in New Zealand have. Well, I think that is wrong. I think it's immoral, and it is certainly not justified on any of the basis that that member pretends that it's being justified on. The Creech report made it very clear that there was no breach of responsibility, no breach of functionality, no cause for concern in terms of the job that was being done by Environment Canterbury with elected members. It was all about irrigation, it was all about water, it was all about that government wanting to get more water out of our rivers onto the Canterbury Plains. That's what the debate was about. It was not about competency. It was not about being functional, it was about water allocation. And I think the member should be honest. I know it's a big call to ask him for that, but I think that the people of Canterbury deserve it. So we had the promise in 2010, we'll have elected commissioners totally against the context of the Creech report. Wyatt Creech, our former National Minister, who was honest enough to say what the government wants to do is not justified. He never said they were dysfunctional, and I challenged that minister to table that comment, and I know he won't be able to. He should be very careful about what he accuses Wyatt Creech of saying, because I tell you what, Wyatt Creech, despite being a former National Minister, is a man of integrity. And he would highly resent what that minister has just accused him of saying. So in 2010, I think it was the Honourable Nick Smith who first sacked our democratically elected council. Said, "I'll be for a very short time. It'll be for a very short time. We'll just get it all back on track. We'll just get the irrigation flowing." He said there was no water plan. The water plan in Canterbury was proposed in 2004, 11 years ago, 6 years before that minister sacked the democratically elected councillors. 2004, an operational water plan, and that minister knows it, because he's on top of his job, usually. But in this regard, he's clearly been rolled, doing what he's told by other cabinet ministers, and actually he's not making a very good job of it. Twice since then, we've had that promise that Minister Smith made to Canterbury people broken. Oh, we'll just have a little bit longer, and then we promise we'll give them back. We promise we'll give you your vote back. Oh, more legislation. And now we get, oh, sorry, we can't have democracy back in Canterbury because it's too risky. March of this year, we had a little glimmer of hope that we might get our right to vote back in Canterbury. This document, Environment Canterbury Review, a discussion document, full of great ideas, all these functions and powers, what the review was all about, the freshwater management plan. Oh, very good. And then it says at the back, put in your submission, got a bit of time for it, better than this bill, which is again truncated, but don't worry, everyone knows what they're going to say. Submissions will be summarised by the review team and available online. Report on the outcomes will be published. The government will then make a decision. Oh, they forgot to say, the government will then make a decision, having totally ignored the overwhelming majority of submissions.
6 councils supported us.
534 submissions, 534 submissions in total. How many of 534 were supportive of the option that has ended up in this legislation? How many, Minister Smith? 16. What is bigger? 518 which opposed it, or 16 which supported it. Shall I give you a clue? It's not the number of people that backed this legislation that we're looking at. 534 submissions and only 16 support the model that is in this legislation. Totally arrogant, totally dismissive, just ride roughshod over democracy. Who cares? Too risky. And ignore the submissions that this document asks for. That is arrogance beyond belief, although I have to say we're getting used to it. So, Mr. Speaker, what was the real agenda? Well, it's always hard to tell with the current government because they're never straight with people. They don't tell people the full truth. They tell them what they want them to believe and then keep repeating it. Well, in this case, it hasn't been successful. Sometimes it is, I've noticed that. Some ministers think that if they repeat things that aren't true often enough, people will believe them, but in this case, it is not the case. People in Canterbury know why ECAN was sacked. It was sacked for one reason only, to get more water out of our rivers, to irrigate the plains. We know the environmental damage that's being done as a result of excessive irrigation. We know that there's an urban-rural tension. And does this bill go anywhere towards resolving it? No, it doesn't. It doesn't restore democracy. It gerrymanders the population so that the strength is in the rural communities. Bjelke Petersen would be very proud of that. Hasn't happened since his days in Queensland. Never before have we had gerrymandering of electoral boundaries in this way. Never before. We've always had an open, democratic, fair process. Well, the minister might know where he's gerrymandered electorate boundaries before in the past, but I'm certainly not aware of any. We have an independent commission with political representation. We have public submissions. We have transparency. We have criteria to be met. None of it is met in this legislation. It's gerrymandered, and then on top of that, the minister says to Canterbury, don't worry about having a proper process for submissions. Don't worry your little heads about that. We'll just give you a short period of time, shorter than any other legislation. I hope the Select Committee gets to go to Canterbury. They certainly did last time and the time before. But again, a truncated process, unless the minister's going to be absolutely disingenuous and say the Christmas holiday break doesn't mean anything. Is the minister going to say that? Well, in that case, you should take at least 3 weeks off the time that's allowed, because there's not... That member should be very careful about pot calling kettles black. Might have some truth discovered in the House if he continues along that line. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the examples that we can use to just demonstrate how the government was thinking is some quotes from the Speaker, actually, when he was a minister. When he said in December 2008 that the one thing that the irrigation community needed to know was that they had to take the urban community with them if they were to get what they wanted. He was basically giving it as advice. But by April 2010, all bets were off. The let's work together, let's collaborate, that was all thrown out, and instead we got we can do anything. The arrogance had taken over the ministers. They decided they were running the show and they were going to do what they wanted. They said, Minister David Carter said to the regional councils at the irrigation conference, we had to act on ECAN, the situation was untenable if we are to seriously make progress in delivering irrigation. I would have thought that what happened recently to ECAN would be a signal to all regional councillors to work a bit more constructively with their farmer stakeholders. On the record, public comments by the minister, who was the only one who told the truth, and now he's not even in cabinet, so that's a bit of a tragedy. The Creech review of ECAN did not say the organisation was dysfunctional. It did not say that it needed replacing by unelected representation. This legislation carries on the removal of a fundamental right of all New Zealanders, and that is the right to vote. It's unnecessary, it's wrong, it was opposed by Canterburyans, and it's about time the government got off its arrogant high horse and started listening.
Order.
I call Jonathan